Amazing. What incredible truth to know that we are the church of Jesus Christ. As you sit down, touch your neighbor, say, hey, you're the church of Christ. We're the church of Christ. Amazing. It's good to be in church this morning, isn't it? That was 2 people. What are the rest of you here for, the coffee? Awesome. We're continuing our series, Make a Difference. Looking through the book of James and trying to understand what it means for us to be people who, as we represent Jesus in our worlds, make a difference there. The power that lives within us, the transformation that's happened in our lives because we know Jesus and because he's changed us and we've given our lives away to him, that has an impact where we live, that we don't go unnoticed, we don't go unremarked, we don't just slip quietly into the night, but we are in our worlds to make a difference and to display the life-changing power of Jesus wherever we go, whatever we do, whatever your week looks like. The Bible is there to teach us how we can make a difference in our world, and the Holy Spirit is here to empower us and to give us what we need to take that power and make a difference wherever we're at. So we're reading through the book of James. This is part 3. If you missed parts 1 and 2 last week, then you can go back and you can catch up. I'd encourage you to do that. But in James chapter 3, James writes about the tongue, and he writes about the power of our words. And I think we all know and can recognize and identify with the fact that what we say carries incredible power. That the words that we speak have the power to change situations, have the power to build people up. They have the power to destroy people, to crush people's spirit. They have the power to change, ultimately, the course of history. Our words have incredible power. I was thinking about this through the course of this week, and I was reminded of something that happened to me 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I met Lynn, who's now my wife. And we were just teenagers. I was still just a teenager. And we started going out in the summer of 2004. And in August of 2004, Lynn and I went on our first date. I picked her up in my dad's old Peugeot 309. I didn't get an ooh, no. I picked her up in my dad's old Peugeot. And we drove out to a restaurant, and I took her to this meal. And we sat down, and we talked about whatever you talk about on first dates. I've only ever been on that one, so I can't really remember very much about the conversation. But I do remember that Lynn was wearing a poncho. And just for context, and she told me to tell you this, 15 years ago, ponchos were cool. It was okay to be wearing a poncho 15 years ago. And she was wearing one on this night on our first date. And there may have been a lull in the conversation. I can't quite remember. But what I do know is that I looked across the table at her as we sat in that restaurant, and I said to her, "You look like a lampshade." And as the words left my mouth, I heard them. And I realized that what I had just done on our first date is call her a household fitting. And so immediately, to try and correct it, I said these words: "You light up the room." Remarkably, she married me. But our words have incredible power. And I think I tell you that story just to illustrate right up front and center that what I'm about to speak about for the next half hour, I cannot claim to be any sort of expert at not saying stupid things. In fact, quite the contrary, I would say that I am an expert in simultaneously getting both feet in my mouth at the same time. It is one of my gifts. But we're going to talk this morning about the power of our words and how we can control what we say so that what we say makes a difference for good and not for bad. If you've been watching the news through the course of this week, you'll know that the power of words is right up there in lights at the minute in our nation. As the discourse in the Houses of Parliament has become uglier and uglier, as tensions have inflamed, as passions have risen, and as the two governmental parties battle it out across those green benches, we've heard language that many say is inflammatory, that many say is going to lead us down a dark path, that many say could incite violence or could bring people out on the streets in riots. And people are talking about the words that are used in Westminster. They're talking about the choice of words and the choice of language, and they're asking for language to be condemned and for apologies to be made. And all over the press at the moment is yards and yards of commentary on the power and the choice of words, because we know that words make a difference. We know that what is said in Westminster, what is said in the media, what is said on the streets can result in action and can change the course of our nation and can change what happens in our world. And those words that are said matter. As I was getting ready for this morning, I was doing some research on the impact of words on young people, and particularly young people who are struggling with challenges in their mental health. And I looked up what it means when young people are bullied, either bullied in real life or bullied through social media. And the tragic reality is that the statistics say that young people who are bullied are twice as likely to take their own lives as those who aren't. The power of words. Many of us heard that stupid phrase when we were growing up, "Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt you." Utter rubbish. Words have incredible power to sear things into our souls, into our spirits, to change the course of our destinies, to change the course of our lives, and that all of that happens through the power of words. So James comes in chapter 3, and he speaks directly to what we say and how we say it. And this morning, I hope we're going to learn some stuff about choosing our words and what we say. We're going to read together in James chapter 3. You can look it up yourself if you have a Bible, otherwise it'll be on the screen behind me. Let's read. We're going to read the whole chapter together because it all speaks to this reality of how we control what we say. "Not many of you should presume to be teachers, my brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. If anyone is never at fault in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to keep his whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Though they are large and driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person, sets the whole course of his life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and creatures of the sea are being tamed and have been tamed by man, but no man or woman can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this shouldn't be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by his good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom doesn't come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, of the devil. Where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness. James is really clear, isn't he, about the power of the tongue, about the power of the words that we say. And this morning we're going to look at how we might control what we say, how we might be careful about what comes out of our mouths, recognizing that it has incredible power. So Callum has a helpful prop that he's just got to get, which is going to help me to illustrate this morning how I think we can control our speech and control our tongue. This is a very rarely used pressure washer. I bought it because I got to that stage in life where you think that really you ought to have one of these. And any dirt or marks that you see on it are a result purely of it sitting in the garage gathering dust, and not because it is usefully utilized for things like washing my car or clearing the paving or anything like that. But it's a pressure washer. And the deal with this is that you plug it in to a source of water, you switch it on, and it puts a jet of water out that you use for whatever you need to do to clean your car or to clean your garage or your drive or whatever. And this morning, I want us to consider that actually what we say has three elements to it. The first element is that everything that we say comes out of our heart, out of our reservoir. And for this morning, we're going to consider this barrel as our reservoir. Everything that we say comes through a control. This can be either on or off, and that is our tongue. We choose what we say. And everything that we say can be customized in how it is said, and that is the nozzle, which determines how what we say is delivered to the end recipient. So the first thing I want to talk about is that we need to care for our soul. The reality is that nothing can come through this pressure washer that isn't in the reservoir. And the same is true that nothing can come out of our mouths that isn't first in our hearts. Jesus himself said, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Amy Carmichael, who's a missionary to India for 55 years, put it this way. She said, a cup full of sweet water cannot spill a bitter drop, no matter how suddenly jolted. A cup full of sweet water cannot spill a bitter drop. The truth for all of us, if it's not in you, it can't come out of you. If it's not in you, it can't come out of you. So everything that you ever utter out of your mouth has first been in your soul, been in your heart, been inside of you. So the first thing that we all need to understand is that we have to care for our soul. We have to care for what's inside of the reservoir of our life, because if it's not there, it can't come out. And if there is stuff that comes out which is damaging and which is hurtful, the reality is it was in me first. I don't get any surprise utterances. There's nothing that comes out of my mouth that didn't start in my heart. So the first principle that I need to learn is that I need to care for my soul. James recognizes this. He says in James 3, verse 14, who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom doesn't come down from heaven, but it is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. Where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. He's saying if that's what's in your heart, that's what's going to come out. Whatever's in your heart is going to manifest itself in what we say and what we do. I hope you don't mind for a moment. I tried very hard to think of a different illustration for the point I want to make here, but I want you to just consider whether you would drink from a toilet bowl. That's a pretty unanimous no, I think, from around the room. Most of us would prefer not to drink from a toilet bowl, but how about consider this? If you were given a toilet bowl that was fresh off the factory production line. In fact, you were invited into the factory to watch the whole production process, to see as the porcelain was formed and the toilet bowl was made, and you observed the whole process of the toilet bowl being fabricated, and then it rolls off the production line to you, and you are found in the middle of the Sahara Desert with your pristine toilet bowl. I know it's an odd scenario, but it could happen. It could happen. And you are told, in the next 10 seconds, you will receive 2 liters of water, and you need a container to put those 2 liters into. Every single one of us in that situation, I reckon you would use the toilet bowl. You would put the water into the toilet bowl, because actually, it's not the fact that it's a toilet bowl that's the problem. It's what goes into the toilet bowl. The reality is we don't want to drink from toilet bowls because we know what goes into toilet bowls. We don't want to take out of that because we know what goes into it. And the thing about the toilet bowl in your home is that it is kept clean by the flush, isn't it? You push the button on the top and the flush washes away everything that goes into that toilet that makes it unclean. The same is true of our souls. Stuff goes into you all the time. Some of it you choose, some of it we select and we actively take it into us. And some of it is put onto us by the environments in which we live and we work. But all of it comes into our heart and into our soul. And some of it is a pollutant. Some of it is dirty and it contaminates our soul. Some of it makes the inside of our soul filthy. And the reality is that for every single one of us, we need to flush our souls with the Word of God. Every single day, letting the water of the Word of God flush through us and drive out the pollutants and the contaminants and the stuff that goes into us that contaminates our reservoir, that pollutes our soul, and that can result in stuff coming out of our mouth that we don't want to come out of our mouth. Some of the stuff that we have no choice about, maybe you go to work or you go to college or your friends continually use bad language round about you. And that goes into you. And there's no way for you to insulate yourself from it unless you put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones and move to Tibet. You are going to hear that language. All of us have to deal with it. It's the environment in which we live. And those pollutants, those contaminants come into us. And they pollute our soul. They pollute our reservoir. Maybe you're all more holy than I am, but I've found when I'm in those environments for a long time and I hear that language over and over and over again, I can sometimes get to that situation where I stub my toe and one of those words gets to just here, just before my tongue, and I stop it, but it's in my head. And I think, wow, how did that happen? That's not language I use, but it's got there because it's come into my soul. It's come into my heart, and it's there ready to bounce out of my mouth, and I've just stopped it in time before it's released into the atmosphere. There are some things that we just can't help, pollutants that come into our lives. There are other things that we actively choose to put into our souls. Sometimes I'm baffled. There are social media accounts that maybe some of you follow, and they're inspirational, but the language and the content is filth. And it's still stuff that goes in and pollutes your soul and will cling to the edges of your reservoir. And as it goes in, it means that you're more likely to speak out those contaminants, because if it's in you, it can come out of you. What we watch, the films that we watch, the music that we listen to, if we listen to music that is constantly angry and full of hate and aggression, don't be surprised that pollutes our reservoir and ultimately affects our speech. But the truth is that if we continually flush our souls with the Word of God, if we're quick to come back to God and speak to Him about the pollutants that are going into our souls, speak to Him about the things that are contaminating our reservoir, then we can work to keep a clean heart, a pure soul, have a clean reservoir, and if it's not in you, it can't come out of you. If it's not in you, it can never come out of you. The next thing on this pressure washer is that I have total control of it. When the switch is here, nothing gets through it. It is off. When I switch it on, the water flows through. The same is true of our tongues. We have total control of our tongue. I know that James says no man has tamed the tongue. He doesn't say that you can't control it. He says that we lose control of it. I don't know about you guys, but I've heard myself say this too many times. Well, it just had to be said. Someone had to say it. We were all thinking it. It just had to be said. Let me tell you, nothing has to be said. Nothing has to be said. We always have control over what we say and what comes out of our mouth. We have total control. The truth is that when you say it had to be said, actually, it's an admission that you lost control. When I say it just had to be said, I'm really saying I lost control of my tongue in that moment. I lost control of what I was saying, and I said something, and now I'm going to excuse myself by claiming that it had to be said. The reality, nothing has to be said. But here's what happens in the reservoir of our soul is that as you find yourself in a situation and you get agitated, and you start to get worked up about something. Maybe you're in an environment and people are talking about something and you're just sitting there thinking, I know the answer to this situation. I know what needs to be done. I know how you need to address this. And the tension boils inside of you and the pressure starts to rise and suddenly you lose control and it's out there and it's hurt somebody. Oh, it just had to be said. No, I lost control. I lost control because the reservoir of my soul was getting so agitated and the pressure was bubbling up so much that I was no longer able to contain what I should have contained. Nothing has to be said. The best example of this is Jesus. In Matthew chapter 27, we read of Jesus. He was accused by the chief priests and the elders, and he gave no answer. You know, on that day, Jesus had been accused of crimes which would have broken his heart. Jesus had never hurt anyone. He had never done anything wrong. He was the perfect man. And he had been accused of crimes against God his Father. He had been accused of heresy. He had been accused of crimes against the Jewish religion. He had been accused of all sorts of things which you can imagine that inside he is in turmoil, having to listen to these accusations made against him, and the pressure in his reservoir must have just been bubbling up and boiling over. And yet, he gave no answer. Pilate says to him, "Don't you hear the testimony that they are bringing against you?" But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. It's incredible. But the truth is that all of us have the option, have the ability to control our tongues. We cannot be forced to say anything. And James knew this when he says no man can tame the tongue. But what he was also saying is by God's grace, we can learn to control our tongues. We can learn what it takes to control what we say. Galatians 5 tells us what the fruits of the Spirit are, doesn't it? They're love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, perseverance, and self-control. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit, and we can learn to control what comes out of our mouths. To recognize that fact that it is completely ours to control. I find it so interesting. I was thinking about this and thinking about the people who have been martyred for their faith. People who declared that Jesus is Lord, and it was so abhorrent to their community or their country or the people round about them that they were tried and put to death maybe for their faith. And in every one of those stories, you hear it said that they were asked or given the option to renounce Jesus. It would have been presented to them, hey, you know what? If you just say that Jesus isn't actually Lord, it's going to be okay. And what the people who are persecuting them want to do there is they want to force them to say something. But you can't force anyone to say anything. You can force someone to do almost anything you like, but you cannot force words out of somebody's mouth. That control is completely ours. Same is true if you're captured in a war situation, if you're a spy or a soldier. That's why torture happens, because the enemy wants to get the information out of you, but they can't do it, so they torture you because you cannot force someone to speak. The control is completely ours. And as soon as we realize that, and the sooner we stop abdicating that control and take it back, the better for us as we seek to have total control over what we say, so that we might make a difference for good in our communities, in our families, in our workplaces, and so that we might stop saying the things that bring hurt and that damage people. And hey, I'm probably more guilty than most of you of that. For me, this is such a hard lesson to learn that nothing actually has to be said. So we need to care for our souls. We can control our output. And the last thing is that we can customize our delivery. On this end of the pressure washer is the nozzle. And if I used it, I would know that it has 3 settings. One which will just gently take the skin off your face. One which will take the paint off your car. And one which will take your drive to bits in 5 simple minutes. But I can customize the delivery of the water that flows through my pressure washer. I can consider what I want it to do, and I can adjust it so that it does it in the best way possible. And the truth for us with what we say is that we always have the option to customize our delivery, to think first about who our words are landing on, to think first about who's going to hear what we say and customize what we say for them. My desire is that everything I say would be in response to a need that I see. So I'm not speaking because of that pressure that I spoke about that's within me that demands a release, but I'm speaking because outside of me there is a draw of a situation or an environment or a person, and I genuinely believe that the words that I speak could improve that situation or make it better. And it is a response to a need, and then I can customize my delivery to suit that need. A few years ago, I was involved in a project, and we had to repair the pipeline that takes a significant proportion of the UK's oil down to the refineries and ultimately into our cars and into our homes. And it was a big pipeline. It was completely encased in concrete. It had been laid in a hole in a trench, and then they'd poured concrete in over the top of it. And we were planning this job and trying to figure out how on earth we protected the delicate pipeline with the oil inside it, but removed this cushion of concrete that was all round about it. And we had an elaborate plan designed where we would drill holes at known spaces, and then we'd come in with angle grinders, and then once we got closer to the pipe, we would just get guys with chisels and they'd knock away the concrete bit by bit. And it was going to be painstaking work over weeks to protect the pipeline and to keep it safe because it's fragile, but to get the concrete off. And what we realized was that actually we didn't need to do any of that. We could just use a pressure washer provided that we customized the delivery properly. Because we could use high-pressure water jetting to go straight through the concrete, but stop when it hit the steel. And if we set the pressure right and we kept the water pure, it would cut the concrete away no problem, but leave the steel completely intact. And as we recognized that that was what we were doing, that was the solution we came up with. It saved weeks and weeks of painstaking work and risk, because we learned that by customizing the delivery, we could protect the steel of the pipe. The same works in our lives. If we're considering where our words are landing, if we're thinking first about how they're going to be interpreted, then we can protect the people that we're speaking to. We can be sensitive to the audience that we have, and we can avoid hurting people. Jesus, again, is such a tremendous example of this. You see him when he speaks to the Pharisees, when he speaks to the religious people of his day, and he is bothered by their attitude. He can't stand the fact that they think that they've got it all sorted, that they think that they have the answer, that they think that they have the last word on what it means to be a Jew. He is bugged by their hypocrisy. And he says to them, you guys are just whitewashed tombs. You're full of rotting corpses. And his words are brutal and his delivery is forceful because of what he is dealing with in their hypocrisy. But the same Jesus, when he meets the woman who has been threatened with stoning by the crowd who caught her in sin, says to her, I don't condemn you. Go in peace and sin no more. His delivery is completely different based on the context that he's in and the person that he's speaking to, based on their situation and their world and the damage that they carry. And for all of us, everyone we meet carries different levels of damage. Everyone we meet has different situations and different stories going on, and some you know and some you don't. But all of us can consider our delivery and say what we need to say in a way which considers the recipient first and puts their needs above our own. This is what James is saying in James 3:17. He says, the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate of the other, submissive to the other, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. That's how we say what we need to say. We say it like that, submitting to the needs of the person who's hearing us, being sincere in what we say, being considerate of their situation. And if we do those things, we're not going to cause damage. We're going to do good with our words. We're not going to leave bruised people in our wake, but we're going to leave people who are built up and encouraged. We're going to leave people who are challenged and inspired. That's what James is calling us to. He's calling us to make a difference with our words by making sure that our souls are cared for, that we only say what needs to be said, and that we say it with a thought for the people who are going to hear it, for the person who our words are landing on. I hope that helps us a little bit. As we come towards an end this morning, as I've been preparing this thought, I've just been challenged in my spirit about what we say to each other as the church. And I really believe that all of us need to focus on what we're saying outside, but inside as well. There's a reality that Our role as the church is to build each other up, to be actively encouraging each other, to be countercultural in our speech. And in our culture, in Scotland, we're cynical and we're sarcastic and we love to take the mickey and we don't like to take people too seriously, and we definitely don't like anybody who takes themselves too seriously. So we'll pull down, we'll make sure people know their place. That's just, it's what we are. And I believe that we're called to be completely countercultural, to be people who our words are encouraging. They're always looking to build others up. I believe that as a church, this should be a place where prophetic destinies are being spoken out all the time. Where as you bump up against people in your Connect group or on a Sunday or in your serving expression, you're seeking God for words that you can speak into their life so that you can encourage them and build them up, so that you can inspire them to greater things, so that you can call out of every person that you bump into the God-given potential that is resident within them. Because there is no person in this church who isn't rammed full of God-given potential looking to be drawn out, and it's drawn out by the words of encouragement that we speak to each other. So if we have a city to reach and we have potential to release, then it starts with calling that potential out with the words that we speak. The words that we speak to each other. Can we be deliberate, church, about speaking those words of encouragement to each other? About declaring to each other that you are God's masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for you to do. It's truth for every single one of us. And those are the words that we need to be saying as we look to build the Church of Christ in Aberdeen in this season, for what's ahead of us, for what's coming. That's what we need to be declaring over each other. There may be people in this room today, and actually you still just carry the scars of the words that have been spoken to you. And as I said at the beginning, I know that those words can cut deep. And no matter how many times you tell yourself that they were just words, those scars remain in your soul. Words that were spoken to you of uselessness, or pointlessness, or unwantedness. Words maybe that you speak to yourself, maybe you're even speaking them now, saying, I shouldn't be in this room. I don't belong in this building. If only everybody who's here knew what was going on in my life, they'd kick me right out. Maybe that's the soundtrack that's playing in your mind, the words that are going round and round in your head. Let me tell you, those are all lies. And I want to speak some words to you, which are the words of Jesus. And Jesus' soul was completely pure and clean. His control was absolute. He only said what needed to be said. And his delivery is perfect, and it is focused and customized for you. And his words to you, whatever your situation this morning, are these. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to God except through me. His words to you are, come to me if you're weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Jesus' words to you are, for God so loved the whole world that he sent his Son, so that anyone who believes in him would not die, but would have everlasting life. Those are the words of Jesus to every single one of us. The promise of truth, the promise of rest, and the promise of life. And if you're here this morning and that's what you're looking for, then I want to tell you that there are words that you can say back to Jesus that enable you to take hold of those promises. And they're the simplest but most profound and significant words that you will ever say. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. If you're in this place today and you need his rest, you need his life, you need his hope and his truth, then those are the words that you say to him. You say, Jesus, I give you my life. Can we bow our heads wherever we are in this room this morning?